Okay, here we are again discussing Islam, the subject of Islam, Indian Muslims, Arab world, Islamic world, friends, foes, threats, and opportunities. Now, of course, which I will immediately state that Islam is a phenomenon with that manifests itself differently all over the world. Indian Islam is very different than Arab Islam. Within the Arab society itself, there are different modes of Islam. There is the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. There are tribal societies such as Libya. There are different modes of operation in radical countries like Gaza or Syria. Gaza is not a country, of course, but Gaza or Syria or the Palestinians have their own very radical way of dealing things, or Pakistan. So there are different modes of Islam, and Islam, it should not be said immediately that Islam believes, because there are, of course, core tenets of Islam, but different Islamic societies have different ways of dealing with things, and like Iran before the revolution and Iran after the revolution have completely different ways of looking at Islam, of the role of Islam in society. So here are the bullet points: different Islamic cultures. Unique interests versus all Islamic, pan-Islamic interests. Now, of course, as I said, there are unique interests to each Islamic society, if they are political interests with each country with its own neighbors, or unique interests, unique cultural interests. Like, for instance, Indonesian Islam, they have their own way. So the Islamic parties in Indonesia support democracy, which is a unique phenomenon in the Islamic world, a almost completely unique phenomenon in the Islamic world. Large Islamic parties with millions of members. And of course, it should be said. I asked an Indonesian lecturer in our university, in Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and she said this is because of the Indian backdrop of Islam in Indonesia. Before Islam came to Indonesia, there were Buddhist states, and they led Islam towards a more peaceful path, a more pluralistic, if I can use that word, path. And the founders of modern Indonesia adopted such approaches. And of course, the other side of it is that there are all Islamic interests. There is an Islamic concept of the Ummah, of the global nation of believers, however it is defined. Of course, we know that when there is a problem in an Islamic country, all other Islamic countries do not all rush to give relief. This is an absurd understanding, that very naive understanding of such issues. But there are all Islamic issues. Unfortunately, not all of them are positive. We know that Palestinian nationalism has been a source of radicalism throughout the Islamic world, or Afghan jihad. Jihad in Afghanistan is another unique case in which volunteers came from all over, tens of thousands of volunteers came from all over the Islamic world to wage war in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. Okay, next point is that Israel and India are not completely aligned with Western powers. This should be pointed out, that even though Israel, many view it as a brainchild of Western powers, of England or America. That is the way Gandhi and Nehru viewed it. At least part of Gandhi, it is debatable whether at the end of his life he changed his mind, but Nehru definitely viewed it that way. It should be said immediately that Israel is not completely aligned with Western interests. We do not get along well with Europeans for historical reasons. They were at our throats for 1,000 years. Regardless of the fact that we do have friends there, and the European Union is important economic collaborator and scientific collaborator with Israel. They fund many important projects in Israel. So we have a, shall we say, tense relationship with them. And the question must be asked, I believe it must be asked, are moderate Muslim countries greater allies than European and American left wing? Nowadays, after the Abraham Accords, which we shall address in the next video, Israel gets along much better with the moderate Islamic countries such as the Emirates. Again, moderate is of course a relative term. Moderate compared to what? But we get along much better with them than with the Democratic Party in America. It should be said, again, many people will not voice this publicly because it is politically dangerous to say this, but it should be said that the people in charge of the Middle Eastern diplomacy around Barack Obama and now around Joe Biden, most of them are complete radicals. They are aligned with the radical forces in the Islamic world, if they are the Muslim Brotherhood or even revolutionary Iran. People such as Robert Malley, you can look at the biography of Robert Malley's father. he was a Jew by birth, but he was not only anti-Zionist, he was aligned with the FLN in Algeria and Egypt under Gamal Abdel Nasser. So these were the most extreme radical elements. The FLN was not very much different than ISIS in its violence. They were very violent people. So again, these are radical elements who are other people. You can look at the Palestinians who work for Joe Biden. They are not peace-loving people. They are aligned with Hamas. Many of them, not all of them. Some of them are aligned with more secular forces, but most of them are radicals. I will state this unequivocally. Again, these are people who, of course, we have to deal with, since America is the greatest ally of Israel on the international scene. But they are, it should be said, again, I have the liberty to say this, the people in the Middle Eastern establishment in America nowadays are by no means our friends, completely contrary to many of the people in the Middle Eastern establishment under Donald Trump or the right wing, George Bush, etc. Many of whom were even pro-Zionist. They were part of the pro-Zionist minority in the Orientalist establishment in America. Again, this goes along, of course, with deeper issues of Islamic money in radical Islamic money. Again, Islam is not necessarily a problem, but radical Islamic money funding the programs in universities in America. Orientalists such as Daniel Pipe have written about this. Bernard Lewis, of course, and his battle against these forces, in which he actually had to found a new organization for Middle Eastern studies, because anyhow, the previous organization had been corrupted by these forces. Again, these are greater, deeper civilizational issues. But yes, we have to ask ourselves who our friends are. Like I said in the previous video, we have to have a clear concept of who exactly are our friends and allies in each country. In each country, there may be different forces who are our friends and different forces who are not our friends. And we should not automatically say that all America are our enemies, all America are our friends, or all Indians are our friends, or all Indians are our enemies, etc. There are different forces within each country. Now, as I mentioned, reforming Islam, one of the great civilizational questions of our days. Again, as I said in the previous clip, I believe that discussion, that open discussion, public discussion, is the best approach to these issues. Islam has objective differences and objective problems with coping with Western ideas and the modern way of life, even in its non-Western forms. Of course, there are non-Western countries, Korea or Japan, that are modern also. But we know that in the Islamic world, and I will state this clearly, I don't mean to offend, but I will state this clearly, that in Islamic countries there is almost no serious science being done. Manufacturing is very poor. Patents, translations into Arabic. Again, these are many Islamic countries have problems of borderline illiteracy, etc. Again, I think that I by no means do I think that Muslims have genetic problems or IQ problems that do not allow them to do these things. It should be stated very clearly that there are Muslim scientists and Muslim translators and Muslim men of letters, but they just don't live in Islamic countries. The man who invented the corona vaccine is a Turk living in Germany. He made his vaccine in Germany, not in Turkey. Anyhow, as I said, I personally do not believe that Islam is doomed and it will forever be have failed states among it. But again, I personally believe that Islam has to be reformed. I think it is quite obvious, even though it is extremely dangerous to openly say these things in Islamic countries. You can get killed quite many times over for saying the wrong thing. But yes, I think it is a civilizational challenge. And I think that Muslims have to discuss these issues, even if it is like open discussions on YouTube of the kind that, let's say, Jordan Peterson does or other public intellectuals. And of course, the internet is a safer place to discuss these things than, let's say, Islamabad or Beirut. Of course, you will be more safe discussing these things in Western countries and uploading your videos on internet. But again, yes, I think Muslims have to discuss these issues, and I think it is completely proper to discuss these things also with non-Muslims, most notably Jews, because I think Jews have gone through many of these, and Israelis in particular. I think it would be extremely important to discuss these things with Jews and Israelis. First of all, to overcome the automatic hatred, Jew hatred, that is prominent in many Islamic countries, in all Islamic countries, and even though not among all Muslims, but in all Islamic countries. I think it would be extremely useful for people to see that Jews can be men of faith, that Jews can support conservative values, that Jews are not some sort of satanic, little Satan, as they say in revolutionary Iran. And I think Jews also have experience that can be helpful on these issues. And as I said in previous videos, I think the fact that India is modernizing nowadays, and the role of tradition, of religious tradition, will be different in India of 100 years ago and India 100 years from now. I think, again, the discussion about religion and modern faith is one that has to be had in India also to damage control, to make sure you don't get to problematic and traumatic paths. Okay, so reforming Islam is a great civilizational question of our days. And another question that has to be asked, and this, of course, the critics of Islam say this all the time, that they say that Islam cannot be reformed. These are what they call former Muslims, etc., that Islam cannot be reformed. And the only way to move forward is to leave Islam, to encourage what is called in the West secularism, in other words, irreligiosity, not being religion, abandoning religion. Now, so the question should be asked clearly, should be formulated clearly. Is religion part of the problem? Of course, it is part of the problem. Or, of course, it is part of the problems of religion, not only of religion, but also of religion. Or can religion be part of the solution? As I said beforehand, can reforms within religion actually bring religion to be a completely positive force in our society? Religion, of course, has its ideas of morality and holiness, etc. And I personally believe that these are positive ideas that should be influential in our society. So, should we encourage irreligiosity, or is irreligiosity a problem in its own problem of its own, in which people reach what the sociologists called anomie, lack of moral guidance? Okay. So those are the questions we dealt with nowadays. And in the next video, we will deal with the Abraham Accords versus the Oslo Accords, the two peace agreements that Israel has signed with Arab countries.